Welcome to another edition of Teach the Geek Interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I'm the founder of Teach the Geek. It's an online platform for science and engineering professionals. The first offering of the platform is a public speaking course called Teach the Geek to Speak. To learn more about it, you can go to teachthegeek.com. Again, that is teachthegeek.com. Today, my guest is Tue-Fee. He conducts seminars on management and leadership. He's also the author of 3 books. He worked for years as a naval architect before moving into management and leadership for the Canadian government. I'm interested to learn more about his work as a naval architect, his interest in management and leadership, and his public speaking exploits. Welcome to Teach the Geek Interviews, Ken.
Thank you, Neil. I'm glad to be here.
Wonderful. So I mentioned that you worked as a naval architect, but before that, obviously, you got to get a degree in naval architecture. What was the motivation to get that degree?
Well, it's a long story, Neil, but it started in my childhood. I used to go to the harbor in Mauritius, where I was born, and watch all the fishing vessels from Japan, Korea, China, Taiwan, all over the world in the harbor, and also small yachts from Australia, New Zealand, South Africa. And it amazes me how these, I could say, small ships and yachts can cross the ocean without capsizing. So I think that was the curiosity of my childhood sort of imagination. When I was looking for something to do at university, I said, why don't I study naval architecture and understand stability and ship design and things like that. So it's basically, that was the main motivation, if you will. And also I like to see physical things. I like to be part of the design and construction of physical things like bridges, houses, or buildings. But instead I went for ships, and I got admitted at the University of Glasgow in Scotland, and that was it.
Oh, wow. So you went from Mauritius all the way to Scotland. What was it like? What was it like for you, leaving home and going to this foreign country and going to school there?
Oh, it's a huge culture shock for me, huge, because that's the first time I left the island, and I went there, and they didn't speak English as I knew it. They were speaking Scottish to me, and with the very, very strong accents in Glasgow. Most of my Scottish friends, for the first week or two, I couldn't understand most of what they were saying to me, but I need to survive, and I learned fast. And within less than 6 months, I was speaking like them almost.
And then you go other places and they don't understand you now.
as you can see, I've lost accent now. It's a little bit more Canadian mixed with my Mauritian accent.
Yeah, I don't know too much about Mauritius, but I remember I had a childhood friend whose parents were from Mauritius. His name was Bill Chung. The funny thing is, that's what everyone always called him. They never called him Bill. It was always Bill Chung with his whole name. I don't know, kids. But I also noticed that you got a degree in public administration. What was the motivation to get that degree?
Well, the story is that I did naval architecture for about almost 20 years, and then I peaked. I was in the federal government of Canada at that time, and they told me, look, you either stay in your position as a naval architect and wait till your boss retire and compete for his job, or you move out and go into policy and different things that you haven't done before, but we can train you. And I was at that time designated as a promising visible minority who had shown some talent in leadership and management, and they said, well, we'll train you, there's no problem there, and we'll give you assignment in as many of the departments you choose, and you can then train other people. So I jumped at that opportunity, and I had some very good bosses, and they allowed me to choose my own training. And one of the things I chose was Masters in Public Administration, because I said, if I'm going to be in the public service, I should learn a little bit more in the theories and policies of public administration. So I went for that. And it took me about 4.5 years, because I was working full time. But the plus side is that my whole course was paid by the federal government of Canada.
Nice. I not too long ago, maybe a couple of weeks ago, I had written a post on LinkedIn about career plans and how, some people, they're very big on having them, but then there's some people that say, I said yes to a bunch of different stuff and it led me to this place, not where I'm at now, and it kind of worked out. It sounds like, after 20 years of you doing this, the work that you did as a naval architect, you said you were given that choice of waiting for your boss to retire or going down this completely different path, and it was offered to you by your superiors.
So sorry, I didn't hear the last question, because somehow I was cut off from my side here.
Oh, okay, yeah. So I was saying that I wrote a post not too long ago about career plans and how some people are very big on them, but then there are some that said I did a bunch of stuff and it kind of worked out where I ended up. You did 20 years as a naval architect, but then you were given this choice of either waiting for your boss to retire and taking on his role, or going down this complete different path of policy. Obviously, this is something that you didn't anticipate happening, but you went down it anyway. Is it something, I guess this was veering away from perhaps any kind of plans you had for yourself, but but as I said, you did it anyway. Is this something that, I guess, looking back on, you would have maybe even considered anyway, or was it completely out of the blue, and even if it was outside of your career plans, you saw it as something that was worth knowing?
Well, it was kind of natural progression for me, because I was at a fork in my career. Either I stayed, while I enjoyed naval architecture, I knew the prospect of promotion or of getting ahead in life in that field at that time was very, very limited. And they opened a whole new opportunity for me. And I was confident enough that I could learn all these things. So I took it. It was not a hard decision or anything like that. It was, for me, it was a natural progression. And I said, oh, well, I know I can learn things. I know it probably is going to be challenging. And they told me that it says, as an engineer, you're a very logical person. You have to develop your lateral thinking thing. And I said, yeah, I'm game. I'm going to try to learn that. And the federal government of Canada is very, very good at training people, because there's tons of programs. If you want to learn, you get the best teachers available for you. And then the other thing is, you're supposed then to teach other people. And that's what I liked about it. And my role, and I was told very clearly, we're going to spend all that money on you, but at the end, you have to pay it forward and coach and mentor other people along the way.
Yeah, no question. I mean, you could have been all rigid about it and been like, no, that's not my career aspirations. I started off as a naval architect, and that's kind of where I want to continue down. But you're open enough to see this other opportunity and then think, this is something that I could, go down and see where it takes me. And luckily, I mean, it seems to have worked out for you quite well.
It did. It did. Like I said, also in life, you have to have a bit of luck also. I have lots of mentors along the way. Lots of wonderful teachers and bosses and I think also it's a two-way thing. I think it's, if you're an open person and you're willing to teach others yourself and coach others, you will find teachers and mentors and coaches who would get attracted to teach you as well. So that's how I feel, and all my life, this has been kind of my philosophy. You learn and then you share it with other people, and I love doing that anyway.
Yeah, no question. I mentioned in the intro that you're really big into management and leadership. What's the difference between management and leadership, if there is any?
Well, it's a huge difference. My my thing is I still think a bit like an engineer. So I have a management cycle in my head, and the management cycle is really you plan your work, you implement it, and you delegate, or you implement it, you organize the work, and then you motivate people to do it, and the cycle start again. You see, the leadership side is more influence. You basically have to decide what your priorities are, what your vision for the future is, if you want, and then you have to influence people to accept or to follow your lead, and then you inspire them to want to work in your team. So the focus is different. Management to me is more making things work, whereas leadership is more like influencing others to see your point of view and want to follow your lead, and that's how I sort of share it with my people that I'm coaching or talking to. I said it's quite a bit of difference. Managers are more doers, whereas leaders are more influencers.
Doers and influencers. Yeah, I like the explanation of it. When I think of the difference, management seems to be more kind of forced. Like you work for a manager and he gives you the work to do, and you do it. Whether you really want to or not, whether he's your manager, that's kind of your job. Do what you're told.
Yeah.
But when you're a leader, now it's not forced. It's I'm following this person because I actually believe in what this person is doing, and I want to follow this person for that reason. Yeah, so I really like your definition of it. That was really helpful. So thank you for that. I mentioned earlier also that you do works on doing workshops and seminars on management and leadership. I mean, you started off as a naval architect, and then you worked in the government, the Canadian government, doing policy work, but then you eventually started working for yourself. I mean, is this something that you envisioned for yourself, or is this something working for yourself was something you kind of fell into?
No, it was a gradual thing again. It's while I was working in the government, I was doing the seminars and management and leadership seminars in the government itself, through different workshops as well. But when I took my annual leaves, I would do a circuit. I would go to Singapore, Malaysia, Brunei, and sometimes Mauritius, and that was my circuit. So I'll take my annual leave, which is 4 weeks, and I'll do that circuit. So and these, I mentioned these countries because I have contacts there. So it was my holidays, but at the same time, I would do a few seminars here and there. It's not a lot, but that's I was lucky to be able to do it. Because a lot of people would like to do what I do, but they don't have the contacts there to open the doors for them. So in my case, I was privileged to be able to have good contacts there, and I was able to do things that I love, which is coaching people and sharing basically my life story. I shared my signature seminar was succeeding from engineer to manager, and it's basically sharing my story for 2 days with a bunch of people who were aspiring to become leaders and managers. So it was fun.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And because you're talking about yourself, I'm sure the preparation wasn't all that extensive. I mean, you know your story better than anybody else, so I'm sure it's
Yeah,
easy to talk about yourself for sure.
yeah. Yeah, no, no, but you still have to prepare, especially when I started, right? I'm telling my story, but the story has to make sense. You know, I mean, it has to be tied in with, if I'm talking about delegation, you know, okay, I'm telling my stories, but how I did it. But here are the main principles for delegation. So you have to. It's not a simple thing of standing up and telling your stories. There's a lot of preparation going with it, especially when I started. But after a few years, you're repeating the same thing with a few modification here and there, depending on the countries you're going to and the situation, the culture there, and everything else. But yeah, at the start, there was a lot of preparation. After a few years, it became very, very much easier.
You'd mentioned that the country or the culture would dictate or influence the presentation. In what way?
Well, in many ways, well, I'll give you an example. For example, right? Even in between Singapore and Malaysia, which is two countries side by side, there's cultural difference. In Singapore, for example, uh, the majority of people are Chinese origin, and in Malaysia, it's a majority are Malays, right? So the culture is substantially different between, let's say, the work ethics of Singaporean and and those of the Malaysians, for example, right? It's huge because in Singapore, the work ethic is one of the best in the world. If you want to, some people can argue it's not so great if you don't want to work like 70 hours work week. There, it's almost normal for some people at management level, at who has supervision, who has a lot of responsibility to work 70 hours a week. They don't think twice about it. Not so in Malaysia, right? So uh, when you talk about negotiation of in Singapore, they said, what negotiation? There's no negotiation. You just do what you're told, and if you don't like it, find another job, right? In Malaysia, it's they negotiate. They say, yeah. I want to negotiate less time at work or more pay. If you ask me to work 70 hours, let's talk about pay. You know, that's one example of how I find a huge difference in between different countries and different cultures.
Yeah, I got you. I also mentioned that you'd written 3 books. What was the motivation for the books?
Well, the first one was basically to educate myself. You know, when I started, when I changed, when I transitioned from being a naval architect to become an executive in a public service, was a huge change. Uh, and at that time as well, I suffered a depression when my dad passed away. And so I did a lot of research on the cause of depression, self-esteem, positive attitude, why that's happening to me, why, you know, why do I think the way I'm thinking? Why did I, for somebody who's very positive, who's never had anything in his life, how come I had this depression? So with all the research I did, I was writing a lot of things for myself to educate myself about why I fell in this depression. And slowly, it turned out into a book. Very slowly. It took me 8 years of research and writing, and then I did a lot of speeches on workshops on these themes. And so all the work I did with the speech, with my own research, over time, with the encouragement of my friends, it turned out to become to my first book, which was called Become Your Best. But it's a lot more than depression. It's the whole aspect of life. It's everything. And my claim is that possibly it's the book with the most practical advice for a young person in life, in their career. That's what the aim at the end was to do that.
Okay.
So it's covered all aspects of life, not just self-esteem or positivity, but everything: financial, spiritual, emotional.
What about the second and third books?
Well, the second book was more on management and leadership. Putting people first basically was one of my boss mantra. He says, Ken, put people first and the results will follow. Don't worry about results. Put people first, treat them well, coach them well, results will follow. And that's stuck in my mind because she was one of the person who has mentored me the best. And lots of things in my book is basically her teaching and the other things I've learned along the way through my seminars, from my own especially observing a lot of fairly poor managers and supervisors and leaders. So, you just watch that and say, don't do that. Do the opposite of that if you want to be a good manager. So you learn not from only the good ones, you can learn from the poor managers and leaders. So I'm a great observer of people, of life in general. And this is basically my observation.
All right. And the third book?
The third book is more recent. It was published in 2018. It's about relationships. And it's about all kinds of relationship, personal relationship with your parents, your siblings, your friends, your spouses, and in business, in your partners, every type of relationship, but mostly human relationship. And I don't delve into your relationship with your pets and things like that. It's more. I mean, it's a true subject. People can write about that, right? But I didn't have that expertise, or I didn't want to delve into that. I wanted to limit myself to human relationship because it's complex enough that I don't have to go into lots of other stuff. So and I didn't get too much into the relationship with God, or I touched a little bit about spiritual stuff, but it's too complicated to get into that. For me, it was more practical, pragmatic relationship with your life relationship as you go through your life from childhood to old age.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, and I think it's more universal because not everybody has pets and not everyone believes in God. So at least everyone has humans.
Exact.
Yeah, for sure. So based on the work that you do in presenting and with your seminars and workshops, is public speaking something you've always been good at? Or if not, what'd you do to get better at it?
Well, it's the exact opposite, Neil. It's my biggest fear. It was my biggest fear, public speaking. I'll be honest with you. I hated it. Not hated it. Maybe that's maybe too strong, but it's close to that. I will, from my school days, I would avoid having to speak in classes. I would avoid any debate classes or volunteer for any debates. That's not me at all. So when I went to university, I cruised through it because I didn't have to do many presentation. But at my final year, I had to present my project. And that was a disaster, complete disaster in front of my professor, my lecturers, and my fellow students. Because I was never trained to do that. I was never taught to do it, and it was my biggest fear. So I froze in front of them. Basically, I did froze, and luckily, my professor and lecturer knew me, that I spent 4 years with them, that I'm capable of things. I knew my stuff, but I couldn't talk about it in front of them. And through their charity and compassion, they passed me. You know what I mean? They should have failed me basically on that aspect, but maybe they did fail me on that aspect. But I got through anyway, because luckily for me, I wasn't the only one who did very badly in the presentation part of the project. A few people from overseas were just as bad as me, but maybe not as bad as me, but were not doing well there too. So they had understanding, and you talk about culture. That's a culture thing as well, right? We were not in Mauritius. We were not encouraged to talk in front of our teacher unless we were asked a question. We can't just have free conversation or dialogue with them. It was not encouraged at all.
Yeah, I could totally see that. When it comes to the speaking that you do now, do you ever get nervous before you give your presentations? And if so, how do you deal with your nerves?
Well, I still do, but it's the intensity that's different, right? Before, the intensity is so much that you freeze. Now the intensity is controllable. You get I would say I get excited. I won't call it nervous. I get excited, because it's like I know I have to do a performance now. I have to perform in front of people. I have to deliver something. But the thing is, I know I can deliver. I have the confidence in myself. Having done, for example, if the seminars, I've done many of them, and it's the same thing pretty well, unless I'm doing something new, right? So you get a bit more nervous if you're doing something fairly new, or your expertise in it is not as much as you like. So a lot of time I refuse to speak on things that I don't have much to offer. Why would you speak in something that you don't have much to offer? I just say no, find somebody else, because that's not my expertise. You don't want to pretend that you know something when you don't. So I never do that. I never put myself into a situation where I would not be able to talk fairly comfortably, something that I knew about.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that too, Ken. It's a recipe for disaster, talking about things that you don't know about, especially if you got people in the audience that actually do know.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Oh yeah. No.
Yeah, they'll call you out real quick, and then you're just up there. Now you're gonna freeze.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, and I really like your kind of your mindset shift. As opposed to looking at it as being nervous, you look at it as being excited instead. And one's more positive than the other. So
yeah.
if you're going to think something, think positively as opposed to negatively. I'm a big fan of that too. Yeah. This has been really interesting learning more about you, Ken. Is there anything else that you'd like to add about things that you're working on?
Well, I'm working on 4 more book projects that I used to do them linearly, like a good engineer, one at a time, and I usually take about between 6 to 8 years to do a book with all my research, because I don't put tight deadlines on me. I like the research part of it, where I'm learning a lot, right? The writing part and the editing part is very boring to me. Not the writing part, the editing part especially is very boring and very, I don't like it really. And so that's the part that I procrastinate a bit at the end, but I get it done. But now I don't have the leisure of time, so I have to do all my projects at the same time. And when I'm inspired to work on one book, I go and work on it. So the 4 books are working on them concurrently and enjoying it, without putting any deadlines on time, because it's not a job for me. I don't make huge money of publishing my books. It's just, in fact, for me, I feel it's like a legacy I'm leaving for my children, for my friends, and other people who wants to buy it.
Nice. Well, everybody, that marks the end of another edition of Teach the Geek Interviews. My name is Neil Thompson, founder of Teach the Geek. It's an online platform for science and engineering professionals. The first offering is Teach the Geek to Speak. It's a public speaking course. You can learn more about it at teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Until next time, take care and stay safe. Thanks, Ken.
Thank you, Neil.